once you kind of have that challenge to your identity, you feel a little bit lost. Is there another identity that you've kind of put on to sort of replace that? What's up, fam? It is Coach Jay. I am here with...
Just Coach Rebecca.
Just Coach Rebecca.
Just Coach Rebecca.
Last weekend, you did a lifting competition here at the gym, and you set a new personal record on your clean and jerk, and got real close to a personal record on your snatch.
Yes.
And it's the first competition you had done since when?
November of 2021.
Right, so almost 2 years ago.
Yes.
Yeah, a little short of 2 years. And in that last competition, what happened?
I hyperextended my elbow, catching a weight that I hit this last weekend. I think I'm most proud of that.
Yeah.
But catching a snatch and just holding it onto it a little too long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you basically got hurt in your last competition.
Yes.
And it's been kind of a battle to get back since then.
Yes.
Now, it wasn't serious, right? You didn't have surgery or anything?
No
Yeah.
surgery. And I was back to lifting. I mean, it felt like forever, but I was capable of doing snatches, I would say like 3 months later.
Yeah.
If even that. It looked worse than it was, but it definitely took me down a kind of a path of reconsidering what I wanted my priorities to be and questioning whether or not I could do it again. Like the fear of having weight over my head and something like that happening.
Yeah.
I mean, before, I had never gotten injured. I mean, seriously, I had never gotten injured seriously weightlifting.
Yeah.
So that was the first time that it sort of broke my belief that lifting is always safe.
Yeah. Yeah. Got it. So often the scars of injury are more just like mental, and just being scared to do that thing again.
Yeah.
Yeah. But really that was just like, you're bruised and you were back on it, in a couple of months.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. Yeah. So I guess I wanted to talk today about like, what is the process that you went through to kind of get to the point where you have confidence to be able to lift again?
Yeah.
Right. And more importantly, like as you're kind of lifting, you have these things sort of come up. Like, okay, this is the weight I hurt myself on last time. Like, how do you get through that?
Yes.
Right. So I asked you before this to kind of list a few things that you have done that sort of made the difference. So let's start.
Yeah. So there was like I mentioned, the getting back from the injury itself. So giving myself grace to do other things and, not beat myself up that I let it happen, because there was definitely a point, and I think we talked about this a few weeks ago, just about identity, and I identified myself as a lifter. And what happens when you can no longer do something that you identify as, there's this amount of grief.
Yeah.
And so I can no longer do the thing that I love. So what am I?
Yeah.
So that initial period of getting over it's like, oh, everyone's judging me. I'm not that person. It was like right before the 12 days.
Yeah.
And there was a workout that, was totally in my wheelhouse. It was heavy power cleans, Hollyman, wall balls, handstand push-ups. And then I just remember doing like seated single arm dumbbell presses.
Yeah.
And it was just like in my mind embarrassing that I had to scale it, which, is ridiculous when I say it now. But at the time, it's like, I just felt so lame.
Yeah.
Because of the injury. And so initially just acceptance of where I was at and then allowing my body to recover.
Yeah.
Took time.
Yeah.
Maybe even more time than it took for like my injury to actually like get to a point where I could lift again lightly.
Yeah.
Because once I could lift, it's not like I was back to throwing around heavy weight. It was like starting from scratch, making sure that my tricep was stronger to sustain, the joint health, like just all these little things. So there's a lot of rehabilitation involved.
Yeah.
So as I was doing that, it made me wonder, is this what I really want to do? Like, do I want to continue spending 5 days a week lifting?
Yeah.
And, it was around the time of the Open that was coming up as well. And considering that I had really only started doing more than 2 CrossFit workouts a week. Basically, when I got injured, I just kind of started doing CrossFit again daily. And I did fairly well. I did well in the open. I'm like, okay, what would it be like if I actually did CrossFit?
Yeah.
And so that thought crossed my mind of like, maybe I just accept where I've come as a lifter and I've peaked, but I can lift heavy enough. And now what would the world look like if I focused on gymnastics and my capacity? So there was a time in 2022 where I was just doing CrossFit. That's it. I just did the classes.
Yep.
I was getting in better shape. I was like, hey guys, let's do some CrossFit competitions. I want to see if I like this.
Yeah.
And I had fun. It was fun to like not constantly be thinking about, okay, I got to warm up all by myself to do this lift. I got to go through the motions because sometimes it gets boring. And it was at the Caffeine and Kilos last year where I kind of realized that I don't enjoy this CrossFit. And I was just watching the Olympic lifters and I'm like, man, I miss that. So that was almost a year after getting injured where I was ready to consider myself an Olympic lifter again.
Yeah.
Like before it was just something I was good at in CrossFit, but it wasn't something, and I would just do it when the class did a cycle of Olympic lifting, but it was no longer let me try to get better at this.
Right.
So that was the first time I was like, all right, I'm ready to, get back to it.
Yeah. So you had this sort of crisis of identity of things that you weren't able to do immediately afterwards. Mm-hmm. But then as you kind of got back to it, you're like, okay, do I want to put all this effort into being a lifter?
Yeah.
Which you you considered yourself an Olympic lifter before.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you weren't sure about the answer. So you tried some other things and then now you're coming back to it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So that was like, I guess a year ago now.
Yeah. It was about a year ago. So then I started, weightlifting is a weighted sport. You got to weigh in.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of, again, identity around what weight class am I in?
Yeah.
Am I a 64 kilo lifter? Am I a 71? Like at one point when I was during COVID and I had lost a bunch of weight, there was a moment where I'm like, oh, I could even go down a weight class. And if I go down a weight class, I would be unstoppable if I can keep lifting the numbers I'm lifting at my age. Mm. So, I was on this trajectory, and in that year I gained weight. And so in order to get back down to the weight class I'd been competing at, I was like, do I really want to do this on my own? Mm. So that's when I hired a coach.
Yeah. The first step was what? Just figure out what identity you wanted to take on?
Yeah, I would say the first step was like just evaluating whether or not I'm doing this for the right reasons, and is this what I want to do? Like, are you doing something because you feel like you have to? Like, this is all you know?
Yeah.
I mean, at that point, I'd been so stuck in my routine of just Olympic lifting that it almost, if I had a day where I didn't do an extra 2 hours of Olympic lifting and then a CrossFit workout, it would felt like I wasn't doing enough.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to exaggerate and said the year of CrossFit. It was like probably 6 months in reality.
Yeah.
But that 6 months of CrossFit, I proved to myself that I could still lift, I would say like 90% of what I did like on a good day, and like my regular no bowls, and without having done 2+ hours of extra lifting every day, and I was fine. So I was still capable of lifting those numbers. So did I want to spend that extra time? So at some point it became like, I'm going to just figure CrossFit out, see if this is what I really want to do. Yeah. And then it was like, okay, do I want to dedicate all this extra time? Is it enough? Yeah. Like, what's going to give? Yeah. So, it's just the way that I was doing it before I got injured wasn't the way that I wanted to do it.
It wasn't. Yeah. You were spending a ton of time lifting
and working out. Like it was just a lot. And then, and I was fortunate, I guess, because it was COVID. So I didn't have anything else to do except work out all the time.
You had other stuff to do.
Yeah, but I mean, I had more time. My son was younger, and so he didn't require. I mean, he required a different kind of attention.
Yeah.
So circumstances were different, and so going into this, I was like, do I want to commit the same way that I did before? Can I be as good, not committing as the way that I did before? And so even when I hired a coach, I didn't take it as seriously. In fact, I told my coach, I'm like, I don't want to spend more than like an hour lifting. And I still want to be able to do CrossFit some days. And, this is back when I want to do a muscle up. And so originally I hired her because she was a gymnast, and then she also did Olympic lifting. And she had a program like years back, I think gymnastics for weightlifters. And I remembered reaching out to her like a few years ago about it. So I was like, cool, I consider myself a weightlifter. I want to get better at gymnastics. This seems like a good fit.
Yeah.
So I hired her, and what ended up happening is I ended up getting much better at lifting and realizing I don't enjoy gymnastics, and I just don't really want to put in the work for it.
Yeah.
And that's okay. I'm not sure where the question originally started.
So so step one was, kind of trying on a different hat. Like,
Yes.
I'm going to be this type of person. And I guess one of my questions coming out of that was, what do you consider yourself now? And does it matter to you?
Yeah. So that's a great question, because, going back to this idea of identity, changing how you perceive yourself is challenging. And that's essentially what I've done over the last year, is change how I see myself, fitting in within a CrossFit gym and being okay with it. Because before it was like, I have to do all these things. And now I'm kind of accepting like what I'm doing is enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, it's just, and it took that injury to really focus on what my identity is, because I lost it. I was laser focused on, I am a Olympic lifter who, can also do CrossFit. I'm capable of doing all these things, and I'm like made of steel.
Yeah. And what do you say now?
Now I give myself grace, and I acknowledge I'm tired sometimes. I don't feel like working out and doing 3 hours of working out.
Yeah, but what do you call yourself?
What do I call myself? Well, I wouldn't say I called myself that back then. Now that I'm out of it, I can look back at that chapter and call it that. So I don't know what I would call myself now. It's a great question.
Yeah. No, I mean, because that's part of it, is just like, we have clients that come in here and they do, we go to lift, and they realize that they are not as strong as the person next to them. And they've always thought of themselves as strong. And then they realize, like, actually, there are a lot stronger people here. Then it can challenge your identity. Do they let go of this identity of being strong?
Yeah.
Do they, focus on, like, once you kind of have that challenge to your identity, you feel a little bit lost.
Yeah.
And the question is there another identity that you've, kind of put on to sort of replace that?
Now I will say that a good mantra, I would call it, or an affirmation, whatever you want to call it, is like, I am evolving.
Yeah.
So it would be a identity of growth. So I'm open to the fact that what I am today is not necessarily what I will be tomorrow. And I am allowing myself to be okay with it. So we're talking about injury, and I'm sitting here with a sprained ankle because, I rolled it while running. And me, a year ago, more than likely would have just been like gray cloud following me around, raining just down.
Yeah.
Now it sucks. I mean, there are moments where I'm really upset with myself, but I can acknowledge that this is just a sidestep in the journey that is me and my growth
Right.
in the sport.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I can kind of take it with a grain of salt that way.
Yeah. So each lift doesn't mean as much to you as it used to mean.
Yeah, it doesn't say anything about me as a person
Yeah.
or who I am or how I lift that day. Doesn't say that I am like a horrible lifter, because today what I lifted yesterday feels like a boulder.
Yeah.
It just, the nature of the sport and just the nature of life in general. It's just some days are harder than others.
Yeah. Okay. So easy first step is to scramble your identity and come up with a new one. So
Yes.
that's great. And the second one is hire a coach.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like you picked your coach kind of based on, whether they matched, your needs or they were going to help you to get to your goals.
Yeah.
Well, what is step 3 for you?
So I wrote gain weight and eat more. But, going back to kind of being tied to that 64 kilo weight class, I had cut weight in the past using, a set of macros from Precision Nutrition or something. And so I sort of just stuck eating like this certain number of calories, certain number of macros. And I allowed myself to just kind of trust whatever she said.
Yeah.
So she told me to eat more. I'm like, cool, I'll just eat more.
Yeah.
And I did it. I gained weight, and I had to, work around being okay with what was on the scale.
Yeah.
And again, going back to identity, no longer being a 64 kilo lifter.
Yeah.
But I'm stronger because of it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. So we're talking about kind of recovering from injury, but you're basically saying you wanted to get stronger so that you basically you had more sort of headroom to be able to do those weights?
I'd say that part of this, one of the reasons why I was hesitant to go back into lifting is just the amount of stress and pressure put on me by myself around weight, like just body weight.
Yeah.
And so the day that I got injured, I had been cutting weight. So I just remember, because it was in Reno, and I remember trying to find a place to eat the night before, because you can't really bring your own food. And I mean, that's the thing, is you're tied to your own food, little salt, you're not eating carbs.
Yeah.
At that point, I wasn't drinking water either, because I was water cutting.
Yeah.
And it's just being so miserable. And I weighed in, I barely made weight. So there was like the anxiety all morning of making weight. And I made weight. I tried to eat, but I was nervous. So some of that injury was just due to cutting weight and not allowing myself to, respect that I was probably hungry and underfed going into it.
Yeah.
And then tying into having a coach, I didn't really have a coach to guide me through cutting weight. It was all like me doing it on my own.
Yeah.
So just needing someone to say, hey, so don't expect to lift as much as you did last week when you were eating like a normal person. Things are going to feel heavier. This is the cost of cutting weight.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So when I say like gain weight, eat more, it's like being okay with the fact that, lifting in a certain weight category doesn't say anything about me. I think before it was like I had to lift in this weight category because it's lighter, and the fact that I can lift these weights at this lighter weight, like this says something about who I am, and I'm a great lifter. And so just getting over that. And
how did you get over that?
I mean, it's the weight on the scale is always challenging. And I think that this past meet is what helped me get over it. So, it took almost 2 years, but I felt so good lifting. And I remember about a month ago, I went to my coach and I'm like, hey, what are your thoughts about me cutting weights for this? I know it's not an official meet, but this way I can see how it'll go for caffeine and kilos. And it's great because she was just like, why? I'm like, oh, I don't know. I always just lift at 64. Okay, this is how it will feel. And then like, how much do you weigh now? okay, so you're cutting, X percent. And she was just real with me. This is how it'll be. This is how you will feel. Don't expect to hit the weights that you are used to. This is what you're going to have to do to refuel yourself after weigh-in.
Yeah.
Is this really what you want? And before, she's kind of made comments jokingly you're not training for the Olympics.
Yeah.
And it's you're right.
Yeah.
I even made a comment once oh, so I'm peaking for this. Do you think I should skip vacation? And she's like, no.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah.
So I mean, having that perspective, and it's interesting because I've had similar conversations with my own clients.
I was going to say
I've literally had that conversation and I was the coach and a client has said something like that and I can be absolutely reasonable and realistic with them. But when you're dealing with your own self, it's the rules that you apply to other people suddenly don't apply to you. And I often joke that Heidi's always been my voice of reason in the sense where I just remember during COVID, I would have already done a workout and I was feeling tired, but because you guys were doing some random competition workout, I'm I want to be a part of the team. So I'd first call Heidi. I'm I need a voice of reason. I just lifted for 3 hours. This is what I did. I want to do the workout. What are your thoughts? And she's like, that's stupid. You don't need to lift 5,000 pounds more.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. There's kind of a lot here. So you lift more, eat more, basically your goal for this competition was to be able to hit these weights. And that was it. It was
actually, it wasn't.
Was it?
No, it was just to do a competition.
Right. Okay.
It was really put myself out there, see how I respond.
Yeah.
And so that was my goal. And then as I got closer to it, I started, having thoughts of, oh, how great would it be if I hit that weight that I injured myself.
So that would be the dream.
Yeah, really it was let's just get over the hump of competing. And then my coach wanted me to, prepare for a meet, with a cycle geared towards me, based on all the information I'd given her in the past.
Yeah. So, okay, so the goal coming in was to do a competition, hit something that felt heavy, right? And as you got closer, you're it'd be great to be able to hit these, weights. So basically number one is, let go of whoever you were in the past. Number two is hire a coach. Number three is you're eating and training to basically just do well, not to necessarily you're not wanting all. Yeah. So I guess, I'm trying to think how this kind of relates to somebody that's coming in, they're trying to hit a new deadlift PR, maybe not even necessarily for a competition, and they're scared about hurting their back because they've hurt it in the past. So when it gets close to the time where you approach the weight that you hurt yourself on last time, how do you get yourself to do it?
So practice.
How did you get yourself to do it?
So are we talking day of the competition or we're talking leading into
either
it?
one?
So, I mean, leading into it, I had hit the 155. So I'd hit 70 kilos.
Yeah.
I think the week before. So I was hitting gradually heavier lifts in my peaking block.
So, okay. Let me back up. The first time you go to, lift 155 kilos, why didn't you freak out?
Oh man, I wish it was 155 kilos. 155 pounds.
Whatever.
Yeah.
155 pounds. Yeah.
I am Lasha.
Yeah.
I did. So leading up. So about a month ago, once a week, I would have a build to a top single.
Yeah.
And so I would get to just under 150.
Yeah.
Put maybe 2 pounds on the bar.
Yeah.
And bail on the lift. Nope, not happening. And then just kind of laugh it off. And I don't even know if I truly believed I would do it. I mean, there was this definite barrier in my mind where I'll keep trying. This is fun. But there's something in me that's just eek.
Yeah. Why would you keep trying if you keep not making it?
Well, I mean, not that same day. I give myself one lift. Because every week, I would add a pound. So I can remind myself, okay, I did 145 today.
Yeah.
Next week, all right, it says build to a top single, ideally heavier than last week. I'm going to build to 147.
Right.
And 147 feels amazing. I'd be like, oh, you know what? Maybe I'll just try 150. And then 150, nope.
Right.
And so it took 2 to 3 weeks for me to just sort of say hi to 150, like in earnest.
Yep.
And I did it.
Yeah.
And it felt amazing. And it was like getting past this hurdle, like this mental hurdle of 150.
Yeah.
So I've proven that I can get into the numbers of 1.5.
So how many attempts did it take for you to get that?
I'd say like 6 over the course of a month.
Right. And each
Yeah.
time you're getting a little closer to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
Did you like psych yourself up particularly much? Did you listen to some different music or something like that on the day that you hit it?
so the day I hit 150, I don't remember. I was just like 146, I think, felt great. And, you know, I just say to myself, all right, you know, trust your body, trust your strength. And then it just comes down to muscle memory. And I have to turn off my brain where, you know, you first pull it off the ground or, you know, push off the ground. And it's like, holy crap, am I really going to get this over my head?
Yeah.
So I was able to shut that voice down for a second.
How do you do that?
You just trust the work that you've put in. Like if I'm strong enough to do 146 easy enough, like the bar, if I look at, you know, I record myself. So if I look at the video, I can see the bar is clearly high enough for me to get under it safely. I had no trouble standing it up. Everything it wasn't like a, you know, just pull and pray lift.
Yeah.
So I have the evidence that I'm strong enough to do that weight, probably a few more pounds.
Right.
Then trusting and seeing that, let me go a little bit heavier.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then maybe that 150 is sort of like, oh, I lift it, I hit it, and I'm like, I'm not really sure how I did that. That's generally how I know it's probably my stopping point for the day, but I'll still put on maybe 2 more pounds because in my head I'm like, it's just 2 more pounds. But even me just saying it like that, I can tell you I won't hit that lift. If I'm like, oh, we'll just see.
Yeah. So you had to build up evidence that you could do it.
Yes.
By watching your videos, by seeing, you know, you in different positions. I'm sure there's other like movements that you're doing that support that.
Yeah.
You know, like snatch balance or something like that. You know, to kind of know like, okay, I could actually do this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's really important. That's why I wanted to call it out. Is just like, you know, if you are doing something as technical as an Olympic lift, you know, it could be that the sun shines on you brightly that day and you hit a new PR.
Yeah.
Right? And that does happen. That's happened to me.
Yeah.
Right? But if you don't believe that you're capable of that, then you're not going to be able to repeat it.
Yeah.
Right? And so you have to kind of do that. So, you know, you go into this, you're watching the videos like, okay, that looked pretty good. Okay, I could work on that or whatever. I'll give it another try. And that's, you know, one of those days, it just happened to be that you got 150.
Yeah.
Yeah. So going into the competition, it was like, I know I can hit these kind of weights. So you had that confidence going in. Yeah.
So, yeah. And then I had hit 155, I think a week and a half before the competition. That day I just zoned out, didn't look at videos, just like, because sometimes you get in your own head while looking at videos, overanalyzing, and then you have 500 cues, you know, in your head. So I think I was doing snatches on the minute or something, and it was just fast enough for me to load the bar and not overthink what I was doing. So I will say Olympic lifting is very mental. Like, once you're out of the zone, the narrow zone that you're in, it's very hard to keep going. You either have to like take off weight and refocus, or just acknowledge that the day is done.
Yeah.
And I have had those days where I just get interrupted and I'm like, okay, I guess I'm not going as heavy as I wanted.
Yeah. That's really good, because I have found that any PR for any sort of lift, any big lift anyway, Ollie lifts or, you know, any of the power lifts, it's like sometimes it's just your day.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not. And one thing I always tell people is if you can get within 90% of your 1 rep max on a day when you're testing, not every day, but on a day when you're testing, that's probably good enough.
Yeah.
Right? Because, you know, there's going to be some variation.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, your PR, if your PR is like 155 or whatever, 160, let's say it's 160 and you get to 155, it's like, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
If your PR was 175 and then you're struggling with 150, well, now there's a problem.
Yeah.
You know, there might be some technique work or some strength or whatever. But it's the same with deadlift. It's like if you're deadlifting 400 pounds and if that's your PR and you're able to get to 375, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Right? But if you're only able to do 300 that day, now you might have a problem.
Yeah.
And so I don't think putting so much effort into that one number really serves you in the long run.
Yeah.
It's just like, let's get into a range of like 90, 95%, and then I'm happy.
Yeah. And so I've never, and I coach this, like never plan on PRing in a meet because you get 3 lifts.
Yeah.
Like whatever the lifting competition is, you get 3 lifts, and you know, a month, 2 months away, it's easy to like, I'm going to PR, you know, this felt good, but it's so different, you know, lifting on a foreign platform in front of people you don't know, and just nerves. I think what people found on Saturday is like, they were way nervous, more nervous than they thought they were.
Yeah.
And so a lot of competing is just understanding how to control your nerves.
Yeah.
And I remember like being at the bar at 155, and I like my hands were shaking when I was holding it. I mean, I may have looked composed, but there was a moment.
You didn't.
Yeah, I was. I mean, you know me, but like other people were just like, "Oh, you made it look so easy." I mean, I had to take like a breath to just control my nerves, and at that point, I'm just like, all right, trust that you've put in the work to do this. And then body does what it does.
Yeah.
So, you know, adding that pressure of like, oh, I'm planning on PRing is just, for me at least, it's just too much.
Yeah.
And going into the clean and jerk, like I almost didn't PR. I mean, I PR'd by a pound. But like my only goal was to hit 90% of my 1 rep max, which I did on my first lift.
Yeah.
And I wasn't even 100% sure I was going to do that. And when I did it, I'm like, all right, let me go up. I was actually most surprised on my second lift at about 95% because I had missed the jerk so many times in leading up to it that I didn't have evidence that I can do it.
Yeah.
I don't think I have hit it cleanly. And so when I did it, I'm like, holy crap. And so by then I'm just like, you know what? Whatever I do, I've already exceeded expectations.
Yep.
If I'm going to miss big, I might as well miss big.
Yeah. That's actually one of the cool things about doing an Oli lifting competition is like, there's only 3 chances, but also there are 3 chances.
Yeah.
Right? So you're like, okay, I'm going to start with something that I feel comfortable that I could hit. Mm-hmm. And in the warm up, you're kind of, you know, you warm up really close to that. And then if you hit it, you're like, great, I get to go more. And then if you hit that one, then the third one is just like, whatever happens, happens.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's actually great advice just in general. Going for a PR is like almost never a good idea in anything. Like whether you're doing Fran or whether you're doing a snatch, is like, can I get within 5% of my best? Mm-hmm. Like that is much more realistic.
Yeah.
Are you in the best shape of your life? Great. Can I get within 5% of the best that I've ever done? Great. If you are in the best shape of your life, you'll exceed that.
Yeah.
If you're not, then maybe you're close, but you're not putting that much pressure on yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's really good. And that's kind of part back to the identity piece. It's like, you're not terrible if you don't hit a personal record every time you go out there.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. That's, you know, part of it is you get to lift a whole bunch more times in your life.
Yes.
So going for a PR is also more dangerous because it's the most weight you've ever lifted.
Yeah.
You know, if you're not feeling it that day, then don't push it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose if you're in the Olympics, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. And I include myself in this, is like how much pressure we put on ourselves as like middle-aged parents or middle-aged people to just like perform like we're 20-year-olds going to Paris next year, you know?
Yeah.
And like people who watch all these hook grip videos and this is what this person's doing and I need to perform like that. And it's like, you got a day job and you know, you didn't sleep last night because the kids kept you up. Yeah. But now you're talking to me about training like, you know, Maddie Rogers.
Has somebody talked to you about that? Or is that just you talking to
Well,
yourself?
no, I mean,
in
that's
the mirror?
just sometimes it's me just talking to myself, or it was me. Like,
Yeah.
I always need to do more. I should be doing more. But it's like, dude,
Yeah. Yeah, I'm curious because you were doing 3 hours a day of lifting. Are you lifting 3 hours a day now?
no, sometimes I'll only have like 30 minutes to just get it in. So I don't do CrossFit that much. Maybe once a week I'll do a CrossFit workout. Lifting, so it really, my mobility is what takes the longest. I would say lifting takes less time than warming up to lift. So, I'd say 90 minutes end to end, unless I'm kind of distracted, then it might take me 2 hours, but
Yeah.
it's just because I'm multitasking.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I've actually found that to be true of most athletes that have been doing this for a while. They're actually training less
Yeah.
than the ones who are just getting started. And I don't know if that's because, you just have more training hours behind you. It could very well be. Or it could be that you've realized that doing 3 hours a day is not actually serving you to get to where you want to be.
Well, and at first I did have a hard time. And I think I remember telling my coach this, like, I'm so used to doing all these things. And I'm really in one day now, I'm only doing half of what I used to do in a day.
Yeah.
And I'm spreading it out across a week. So I'm probably doing 50%, if not less, of the volume that I did before.
Yeah.
And so at first there was this fear that, like, there's no way I can get stronger doing this. But the quality that I have put into what it is that I'm doing now is much better. Like, I used to snatch and clean and jerk in the same day. And like clean and jerks, I would just, by the time I got to it, I was just kind of over it, speed through my warm up to get to the weight I was at. And now that I do them on different days, I find that I can actually focus on my form more.
Yep.
So it took evidence for me to trust this. I won't say that like it was an easy transition.
Yeah.
But now I like the fact that, I can call it a day after an hour or even 30 minutes someday if I speed through it and know that I am getting better.
Yeah. I mean, that's part of the danger of coaching yourself versus having a coach.
Yeah.
It's just like someone who's seen a bunch of this is like, yeah, you really only need to train like an hour, maybe. Right? You're doing like 3 hours. That's not necessary.
Yeah.
Right? It makes you feel useful, but it actually might be hurting you.
Yeah.
I see that often, actually.
Yeah.
And it's one of these things that once you kind of tell people like, yeah, I mean, I maybe work out 3 or 4 times a week, there is some element of like, there's a lot of years of, training that leads up to that. But, part of the big thing for me is like 3-4 hours a week. But as long as I do it week after week, month after month, year after year, then I will see progress.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that I've learned is like, you want to improve your clean and jerk. It's like, I could spend 3 hours a day and maybe I can make a difference in 6 weeks, or I could spend like 30 minutes a day and give it 6 months and see that difference that I would have seen in 6 weeks plus a whole bunch more because I just trained longer.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it makes it's one of those things that I'm constantly kind of telling people. Remember, we used to have someone that would come in here and train 3 hours a day to try to get stronger. And it's just like, it's just not how it works.
Yeah.
Like, unless you're on steroids and you want to, train 3 hours a day and you can just do that for an unlimited amount of time, it doesn't work like that. You actually have to take some rest. So love it. Anything else you want to add? Someone recovering from injury?
No, not for someone recovering for injury, but I do want to bring up some magic that I did before getting ready for this competition, because I was really nervous, and I'd like to pretend it was just for this competition, but really I just always get nervous before. So I did this thing on I think it was like the Thursday before. I wrote out in detail each lift that I did, like just coming in. This is before I did it. So I wrote out like.
So you're visualizing.
I visualized it,
yeah.
but I wrote it out. And so I'll skip ahead, but I did each lift, and from each lift I took out kind of the affirmations that came from it, or the things to focus on. So I just want to read my 155. So I had just done this weight the week before. I knew going in the weight would be aggressive, but this is the weight I injured myself on. So there was a bit of redemption needed doing this weight in front of friends and family. Again, my nerves and adrenaline threatened to consume me, but I trusted my body and trusted my strength. I stepped up to the bar, intent on using my legs to push off the ground. I aggressively pulled myself under and punched 155 over my head with tenacity and confidence. Good lift. And I willed it and manifested it into happening.
That's what happened.
So, yeah. So before I did my lift, and I have one for each of my attempts, I had already kind of planned it through. I would just, kind of read the thing I wanted to focus on that in my brain got me through the lift. And it worked. It was crazy. So, somebody reached out and asked me about, what I did to prepare mentally for something. Because, I looked shocked when I did some of those things. Like, how do you get through it? And so writing things down and, yes, visualization, but writing it in the past tense allowed me to, when reading it, kind of like, it was like I was reading a script that was already written. So I knew how the lifts would turn out. So I was...
Is that what you felt going into it?
Yeah. Oh, I was really nervous.
No, but I mean, like reading through that stuff, you're like, okay, I'm just playing out this script.
So this is the first time I did this. So there wasn't 100% belief. But as I was really nervous going into it, it helped kind of tether me to the moment.
Yeah.
So without having to convince myself and coach myself and give myself words to get me through, just empty affirmations to get me through it, I had it grounded in, this thought process. And it helped take the noise away.
Yeah.
And allowed me to focus. So I actually had this, written down. I had it with me where I was sitting, and I would read the next lift before I did it.
Yeah, that's really good. Oh, I didn't realize that you went to that detail. That's amazing.
Yeah,
that's amazing. Excellent. Well, if anyone has questions for Coach Rebecca about her lifts, they can just reach out directly to her. But I'm curious, when is your next competition?
I'm doing Caffeine and Kilos, October 7th.
So that's another lifting competition.
Yeah. Okay. So there's the CrossFit competition, there's a strongman competition, and there's an Olympic lifting competition all at the same time.
Excellent. I can't wait to read what you write on that one. Read that. Are you going to do that again?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Well, we come watch you lift on October 7th.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you'll be competing, right?
Will I?
I think so. I mean, Rio's going to be doing Olympic lifting, and you can take a spot.
Yeah, apparently I got put on a team. So you can see how I approach competition. So awesome. All right. Well, thanks for joining us, and thanks for sharing this story with us. I think this is really interesting also to hear how nervous this stuff kind of makes you, and how the process that you went through to go through it, because I think a lot of people go through that stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll see y'all next time. Bye. Thanks for tuning in. If you like this episode, we've got plenty of others. Go check out this one over here.